Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because I think it's going to save investors from a lot of stress and frustration over the next few weeks. We just had one of the best Bitcoin rallies ever thanks to all of the excitement surrounding the election outcome, as well as the huge inflows we saw piling into the Bitcoin spot ETFs and all of the Bitcoin buying done by MicroStrategy leveraging US denominated debt. And after enjoying weeks upon weeks of rallying and upside, Bitcoin has finally stalled here a little bit, kind of like what we saw in March and April of 2024, in December of 2023, and in March and April of 2023. And all of those consolidations and stalling periods have one thing in common: long-term holder distribution. Now, I know the narrative all over Twitter and YouTube is always supply shock, diamond hands, no one's ever going to sell their Bitcoin, we're going to $1 million per coin. But if we look at long-term holder distribution here, we can see that they ramp up profit taking going into rallies, and that results in some cool off and correction. We saw that going into March and April of 2023. We saw that going into December, January of 2023. We saw a lot of it going into March and April of 2024. And here we are today entering December of 2024, and we're seeing huge profit taking by long-term holders once again. Now, this is very normal across all asset classes. After huge rallies, long-term holders and investors like to pay themselves a little bit, and that usually results in some chop and consolidation. But I like to make it very simple for myself. Until Bitcoin closes a weekly candle above 98K, I don't see any reasons to be super excited. Or until it closes a weekly candle below 91,000, I don't see any reasons to be incredibly concerned. And I'm optimistic that Bitcoin's next move will be a rally higher because historically markets tend to do well after presidential elections and don't stall out until the president-elect takes office. And if we look at the average election price action for the S&P 500 over the past 90 years, you can see a lot of volatility going into the election because of all the uncertainty. We then see a rally after the election as the markets finally get some clarity on who the next president will be. But then once the inauguration happens, that ends up being almost a sell the news event where markets then have to face reality and consolidate for a while before the next rally higher because of some new exciting policies or whatever it may be. And a clean close above 98K would be a good sign that we will rally into the inauguration, but we could have some big shakeouts before that actually occurs. I'm still optimistic that the cycle top is not in yet for Bitcoin, and we'll have a top sometime around Q1, Q2 of 2025, which actually aligns historically with what we've seen when an incumbent Democrat gets replaced by a Republican for the S&P 500. We have that rally after the election going into the inauguration. We have the post-inauguration pullback, and then we have a strong rally for the next 3 to 6 months. And then we see a huge drop and correction around the summer of the post-election year, but that is still quite a ways away, and we're going to have to monitor price action and see how that develops as we work our way through 2025. And I'm still expecting a lot of volatility for Bitcoin in December. We have a lot of new market participants piling into this market right now. We can see crypto exchange volumes hitting a 3-year high, which means volume is the highest it's been since November 2021. We've also seen extreme greed sentiment over the past 2 weeks, but it is finally cooling off a little bit, and now it's just in the greed zone. But we still have a lot of leverage piling into the system, and we haven't seen a leverage wipeout or sentiment reset since about August 5th of this year. And this is why I titled my most recent weekly report, The Calm Before the Storm. It seems like everybody is happy and everybody's feeling a lot wealthier, and no one has really been caught off guard by any major corrections or surprises with macro data or something from the Fed or something in the crypto market specifically. So for now, I'm just happy to sit on my existing positions and my comfortable cash holdings and look for opportunities over the next few weeks. I still think that buying Bitcoin is quite expensive at current prices, at least for myself. I'm sure there's many that disagree. And it's no surprise to me that after such an incredible year-to-date run for Bitcoin, especially with its almost $2 trillion market cap, it's not surprising to me that we're seeing a rotation to altcoins right now and a fall in Bitcoin dominance. We're finally seeing some signs of life from Ethereum, which is great to see. Historically, Ethereum tends to show some signs of life after Bitcoin consolidates after a huge rally. Sunday's close above the range mid-level was quite promising, and I am now targeting the range high as long as we continue to close weekly candles above 3,400. A lot of ETF investors seem to agree because we're seeing record net inflows for Ethereum recently, especially into those new spot ETFs. And we have a really strong narrative for those recent ETF inflows because perhaps the new SEC will allow those Ethereum ETFs to stake the Ethereum and pass on those staking rewards to the ETF holders, because not allowing staking rewards has been a pretty big detriment to the Ethereum ETFs. Speaking of ETFs, it seems like Solana is next in line and will likely get one in 2025. It's been consolidating ever since that all-time high retest, which makes sense, and it doesn't really concern me as long as we're above the previous range high, and it looks like a lot of the attention Solana had is going to other projects as of right now. And this is quite standard in this market. We tend to see excitement and attention bounce around from asset to asset and chase pumps all over the place. As for macro, if Bitcoin continues lagging global liquidity by 2 months, we would expect Bitcoin to consolidate and cool off over the next few weeks. We're still seeing quite bearish price action from the dollar index, which makes me quite optimistic for risk assets, because historically that weakness in the dollar index has resulted in those Bitcoin mania phases and those huge alt seasons as well. But the dollar index's price action is going to be driven heavily by Fed rate cut expectations. Right now, we're still pricing in 3 rate cuts. We did get our first important labor market data print for the week with job openings today. It came in at 7.74 million. The recent downtrend is a bit concerning, but we're now back at 2019 levels, and our recession start average is quite a bit lower than where we currently are. So I don't see any huge signs of imminent recession or any reason to panic for risk assets quite yet, but I'll be paying a lot of attention to initial jobless claims and continuing jobless claims on December 5th. And most importantly, we have non-farm payrolls and the unemployment rate on December 6th on Friday, which I expect markets to react to quite significantly. Not to mention, we'll also be getting updated inflation data December 11th next week for CPI and core CPI. But as we look forward at the longer term, the federal government is still running huge deficits and the trend is only worsening. Government debt is going parabolic, and that debt does have to get monetized eventually. So I remain bullish on risk assets like the S&P 500 and risk assets like Bitcoin. But our short to medium term price action will likely get decided by whether we get a weekly close above 98K or a weekly close below 91K. And I would not be surprised if we saw fake outs and chop that wrecks investors in both directions in between, like what we saw in the summer of this year and like what we saw in the beginning of this year around the ETF launch. New market participants and leverage traders tend to get wrecked in these choppy market conditions, so zooming out and having a plan is a great way to avoid that stress and frustration. But we'll definitely continue to document it and see what happens. As always, let me know what you expect. Will Bitcoin's next move be a close above 98K or a close below 91K? And as always, thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.